we had about 150 pairs of Roseate Terns, and now we have 1,740.
Welcome to Nature Magic. Today I'm talking to Dr. Stephen Newton, Senior Seabird Conservation Officer at Birdwatch Ireland. Stephen is responsible for managing the long-term conservation projects at Rockabill, the Roseate Terns, Kilcoole, Little Terns, and a variety of other seabird monitoring and research initiatives, including the FAME and MarPAMM programs, which have focused on deploying loggers on seabirds to identify key feeding areas and migration strategies. Away from seabirds, Stephen has coordinated surveys of choughs, upland birds, and was a member of the team who developed the Birds of Conservation Concern in Ireland concept back in 1999. He is also chairperson of the Irish Rare Breeding Birds panel, and in his spare time is a keen local patch bird tracker. Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for coming onto the Nature Magic podcast. Could you tell everybody where we are talking to you from today?
Well, I am in a very boring location, sitting in my office in Kilcoole, County Wicklow, in a business park or whatever. So I don't have a very nice view, except for the maps and the bird pictures on my walls. But if I take a few steps, I can just about see the Sugarloaf, Great Sugarloaf, which is our local landmark in this part of Wicklow. But unfortunately, a great big industrial unit has just been built in front of it. So it's a bit chopped off now, which is a bit of a shame. But
you're the far side of Ireland from us. We're in Galway on the west, and you're on the east coast for the people who aren't Irish that are listening in.
Yeah, very much on the east coast. A lot of my work involves the east, but I do get over to the west quite frequently. My sister lives in Clare, so that's an excuse. And my kids all go to college in Limerick and Tralee and whatever. So I'm up and down, backwards and forwards quite a lot.
Good. So hope to see you over in the Burren Nature Sanctuary the next time you come.
It's on my list to do later in the summers to go and see my sister. So
great. So could you tell us what you work for Birdwatch Ireland in conservation, and maybe you could tell the listeners what you do and how your interest in birds was sparked?
Okay, I'll start with the Birdwatch Ireland bit. Yeah, we're obviously a big ENGO, environmental and non-governmental organisation. We think we're about the largest ENGO in the country in terms of membership. We must have about 10,000 members. So, we are a voluntary organisation. We work very closely with a lot of state bodies, trying to do our best for birds and their habitats. But, we don't win at everything, but we work hard at it. We have a staff of about 20 to 30 people, but it increases particularly in the summer when we take on a lot of field workers and nature reserve wardens and whatever, so that the number employed would jump up significantly. We're spread about, although this is our HQ, we still haven't really got back to normal after COVID. So we still have a relatively big office, and there's only sort of half a dozen of us in it instead of the usual, or what used to be the usual, the 15 or so. We have other offices in the Midlands and up in Donegal, and quite a lot of people, even prior to COVID, worked from home in various scattered places in West Cork and Galway, whatever. So that's Birdwatch, and we'll be discussing a little bit more about what we do and later on.
Yeah, the different projects and things like that.
For me, birds, I don't know. It's not always been my job, so it's something I've always loved and done. I would have to sort of maybe credit my father and uncle in my early years for buying me, sort of wildlife magazines, and that might have sparked a bit, but they certainly didn't take me out and, show me nature. My father died when I was very young, when I was 4 or 5. So that side of it was out. So it was really just me exploring, and obviously to any bird watcher, birds are the best thing because you see them, they move around, they're pretty, they're colorful, and do lots of interesting things, so whereas I quite like plants and botany, but they're not, they can be very beautiful, but they don't catch your eye in quite the same way as watching a gannet plunge dive or something, and you think, wow, that's great. Anyway, so I think my love of birds just evolved, and I've had various careers, not all in nature conservation, but now for the last 25 years or more, I've been working with Birdwatch, trying to protect mostly island seabirds. So,
yeah, fantastic. So do you remember the first birds that you got interested in when you were young?
Well, I was brought up on the coast, so I was very used to cormorants and kittiwakes and whatever. I lived right beside a big kittiwake colony and cormorants and whatever. So seabirds to a certain extent, but then on the passerines, I would be chuffed when a redwing in the winter would pop up in the garden or something like that. And I know when I'm out on the coast walking above the seabird colonies in this early spring, before the seabirds have really kicked off, wheatears would turn up some point in March, and that would be another bird. So I think redwing and wheatear are sort of migrants that popped up in the spring, particularly for the wheatear, and the autumn winter for the redwing. Redwings usually meant snow and sledging and all that sort of fun. But then it was always the coast that I would get most enjoyment out of, with the seabirds and gulls and waders and whatever.
Oh, that's a lovely description. Very, very good. Have you had any particular special moments with birds during your life?
Oh, yeah, I have them every year. This thing, and it's a different special moment for a different event each year. So I would struggle to bring out, an epiphany moment or anything, because doing what we do, we get to some incredible places and spectacles. For me, going to Skellig or whatever, which I think has to be the best thing Ireland has, anywhere, in terms of, and yes, most people like getting on to Great Skellig Michael, and going up to the monastery and experiencing the puffins and whatever. But your boat trip out there always includes a circuit of Little Skellig and just the noise of 30-odd thousand pairs of gannets, the noise, the smell, and the fact that you're on a little, I don't know what the right word is, but it's a little boat at the bottom of this massive lump of rock, absolutely smothered in gannets. It's got to be one of the most amazing experiences in Ireland. But
it's giving me shivers. Yeah, fantastic description.
So any immersion in a seabird colony at the height of the season, I think it's just incredible. But then for me, there's always milestones every year that you record, that you look forward to. The next stage in the passing of the seasons, and obviously in the spring. For me, it's the sort of first willow warbler, and I now live on the edge of the Wicklow Mountains, and hearing or seeing the first willow warbler, usually plus or minus the 1st of April, that really means spring started to me, when there's a bare clump of willows and this bird that's flown all the way from southern Africa is just singing there, and it's often snowing or sleeting or raining or something. It's horrible. Yeah, they've made that journey, and there they are sitting, you would think, feeling as miserable as sin. Why the hell did we come here? But that's what they do. So I love those little milestones, so that would be one for the spring. Then the summer, I get totally immersed in seabirds. So one of my main sites is Rockabill Island off County Dublin, where we look after the terns. And the first terns turning up, usually the very end of April, early May, is a very special moment. There's only a few of them, and bear in mind, 2 weeks later, we know we're going to have about 7,000 or 10,000 of them. But just seeing that first little group coming in and starting to squawk in their special way and flying around the lighthouse on the island, and you think, they found us again. We're in business. That's.
Oh, wow. You should write a book. You're very descriptive. Thank you. And you are the Senior Seabird Conservation Officer responsible for those projects at Rockabill and Kilcoole. Can you tell us about the state of bird life in Ireland at the moment, without being too depressing, but let's have a sort of baseline and what we need to do about it.
There's always positives and negatives and things. Some things are doing surprisingly well. Some things a lot of things aren't probably, but we'll touch a little bit on both. But the main thing we do with that, with a bunch of colleagues, just a year or two after I started work with Birdwatch in whenever it was, the 1990s. I met together with some colleagues from the RSPB in Northern Ireland, and they brought in some of their senior people from England, from their office in Sandy. And we had a headbang about how could we describe the state of birds in Ireland, to give us a framework to pitch things on. And it's something that was emerging in a few places as well. And it's called a Birds of Conservation Concern process, for want of a better word. And literally, it's an analysis of hundreds of different data sets that we do, usually at about 5 or 6 year intervals, and we're trying to assess what's going up, what's going down, and what needs a little bit more help and all this sort of stuff. So this thing has got BOCI, Birds of Conservation Concern in Ireland, and I say that with the first one we published as a sort of technical article in 1999, and then every 5 or 6 years we repeat the exercise. So we're looking at the number of sites a bird occurs in, whether its population's going up, down, about the same, and all this, and we end up with classifying each species, and there's about 200 that we consider a sort of normal residents of Ireland for some or all of the year. And we produce this traffic light system with a red list, an amber list, and a green list, and it's pretty self-explanatory. The red ones are the ones in trouble. The amber ones, there's concern, but we're not quite sure which way they're going. And then the green one is the one where we think the birds are either stable, increasing, and they're, managing to live happily with man and what we do to the environment. So, in that category, in the green list sort of thing, it'd be things like great spotted woodpecker, which, first appeared in Ireland only 10 or 15 years ago. Some claim it was a native species at some point, and that some bones apparently belonging to woodpeckers were found in a cave in County Clare, I think. So there's evidence they were here briefly at some point in the past, Ice Age time, but there must have been some, biggish deciduous trees for them. 10 or so years ago, they appeared in County Wicklow and more or less simultaneously a few in Northern Ireland. And the feeling was that possibly, two explanations. One was that there would be part of an eruption, which would be a mass migration of birds out of Scandinavia when various food stocks collapse, whether it's pine cones or something. This forces some species to move south and west. So in the Shetland Islands in the UK, they would suddenly start seeing woodpeckers and things like that. And then occasionally we felt a few of these birds might reach Ireland, and one or two of them might have decided, it's actually all right here, why fly back to Norway and stay? But later on, we got into sort of genetic analysis, and we managed to work out that actually that they were either the ones in County Down in Northern Ireland would come from Galloway in Scotland, and the ones in Wicklow would probably come from Wales, sort of the nearest land points. And we knew that the British population had exploded, it had increased to tenfold over 20 or 30 years. So there was loads of them, and they were obviously looking for somewhere new to live, and they found us. Normally they wouldn't want to fly over water at all, but a few of them did. And now you can probably see them in about half the country, maybe not in Galway and Clare yet, but I'm sure they will come. So
that's fascinating.
That's just one thing. But so from it being a very rare bird, and you'd say, it has to be on the red list and whatever, it's now become so common. I see them on the feeders in my garden every day of the year. And it's just I still get a kick out of them anyway. But
Very cool.
I can't wait to
see one. Yeah, I haven't seen one in Galway yet, but I can't wait to see one.
I'm sure they're pretty close, and there might well have been some in East Galway, maybe. But okay. So the birds of conservation concern, that's our baseline, and we assess everything from there. And a lot goes into it. If you think of the thousands of geese we get in winter and whatever, we have to sort of factor all these things in. Populations going up, populations going down, or whatever it is. But we end up with, unfortunately, a growing red list, a diminishing green list, and quite a lot of birds in the middle, in the amber zone, which would be where they're probably doing okay, but we just got to keep an eye on them. Or there might be species where they're actually doing really fine, but because Ireland is so important for them, we have to kind of flag that up, that we're looking after a big chunk of the European, or occasionally the sort of global population of a species, and therefore there's a responsibility with that. So things like Brent geese, the pale-bellied Brent goose, we have 90% of the world population of the Canadian breeding pale-bellied Brent goose that comes to Ireland. Occasionally a few spill into Scotland or Wales, but they're all here. So although we have 30 or 40,000 of them, they're not rare. Ireland is very important for them. And the same with the gannets. We have a big chunk of the North Atlantic population of gannets on our country. And then we will start talking about roseate terns later, which is my thing, but...
Yes, okay, very good. Could you explain just briefly why do we need birds? Why they are important for a healthy ecosystem?
Well, I think if you look across the globe, they have different roles and different sort of habitats and ecosystems. And I thought about this a little bit, but certainly quite a lot of them eat, insect pests of farmers. So there are some benefits to having birds around in the environment. I'd say very, very few of them really seriously impinge on anybody's livelihood. I know some farmers will grumble about the impact of wintering geese on their fields and nibbling the precious spring bite, at that time of year. But the fishermen will moan about, whether it's anglers or commercial fishermen might moan about the gannets.
And nobody's
cormorants eating their fish.
Okay.
The birds were there before eating those fish, before people were commercially harvesting them or whatever. So I think we have to learn to share with them. But I say they have a role as not really in Ireland as pollinators, but certainly as pest controllers. You think of swallows and swifts and martins, they're cleaning up vast numbers of aphids and things that farmers don't like. So there's a benefit.
And obviously, looking at it from the other way, if we don't have the aphids, they have nothing to feed on, which is a problem with all the pesticides. And one particular group are not popular, and that's the crows. So I feel sorry for them.
Yeah, and I mean, some of them are pretty beautiful birds, and I agree. People love to hate magpies, but when you actually look at them, they're quite a spectacular bird. And yes, they do get up to mischief, and they eat smaller birds and their eggs and chicks and whatever. But that's nature, and But think we have a big rookery here, and a lot of people like to get rid of them out of their farms. So they're safe here, and we have jackdaws. And when I'm feeding in the morning, I can call one of them, and he comes hopping along and eats some food. And they always leave a lookout here to make sure that if anybody's feeding the animals, he will call the rest of them over to clean up. Yeah, I agree that the rooks, big rookeries, and then in the winter their roosts are one of the really special things we have. And yeah, nobody really loves them in the same way we love robins or woodpeckers or something, but I think the corvids are fascinating. And then obviously on the west coast you have one of my favorite birds, which is the chough, so, and they are, the most beautiful crow. And we have a lot of them, on the west and the south coast. So we should be very proud of that.
Yeah, very good. Do you want to tell us about some of the schemes that are actually working to protect bird life? And I know there was a new grant announced for the waders at the biodiversity conference. What do you think is actually working, and what would you like to see more of?
Well, I mean, if we're on the agri-environment scheme sort of front, I wouldn't be happy with many of the schemes that our Department of Agriculture has come up with over the years. That, yes, there have been little components and they've encouraged farmers to plant hedgerows and whatever, but they tend to plant these things and then more or less ignore them and neglect them, and rather than nurture them as a source of biodiversity and a method of stock control, which is what it's supposedly all about, and whatever. But so agri-environment schemes, I always think we could do a lot better and be more targeted. And I know some of the recent ones in Gloss and whatever have focused on putting up nest boxes, for things as big as barn owls at the rare and the exciting end, but then just for tits and robins and whatever at the more common end of the scale. But what we found is that these things they're told they have to put up 10 or 20, and they just hammer them onto every tree, around the farmyard, rather than spreading them out and thinking about, birds are territorial, usually, and need a bit of space. So it's that actual.
Yeah, everybody has the bird boxes and the bat boxes. We are part of that scheme as well, but I've seen them even hammered in a row onto a wall just because to tick the boxes.
That's it. So I really think where we've got our Chagas advisors and whatever, and they're very good, they always need to be in an agri-environment scheme. They need to be partnered with an ecologist of some sort that will say, this is how we do it. We want to work together. We want the farmer to, make a profit and a living and fine, and the wildlife need a bit of space, and this is how we do it. So that sort of policing or better supervision of those projects. And I know we've just announced a new one, haven't we? There's a new one coming up. I can't remember what it's called. But again, hopefully there will be a little more of a role for ecologists and environmentalists to work alongside the agriculturalists.
Yeah, absolutely. And what can the general public do to help bird life? Because everybody, we had the barn owl project here, and there was a lot of interest of what can people do. So education is a big thing. People do want to know how they can help.
Well, there's lots of ways, and I mean, certainly the citizen science and bird recording or whatever wildlife recording, there's schemes for absolutely everything now, so it's brilliant, but you've got to be a little bit tech savvy if you want to contribute. But, we'd encourage anybody and everybody to contribute to some things. We have a thing called Birdtracker, which is that you go for a walk with your dog every morning and you see whatever birds, you can log that, on your phone onto a thing called Birdtracker, which you can find via the Birdwatch website. And literally, it's not very technical. All you're saying is, I saw, 10 robins, 3 blackbirds, whatever. And you do that every day or once a week. You build up a knowledge and an understanding of your local patch of birds. So I would encourage people to record. Obviously, on the bird front, we can put up boxes and, plant berry bushes and whatever in our gardens for them, and put up peanut feeders as well, because, you'll get a woodpecker. If you haven't got one, you'll get one soon. And they're just great things to have. So that there's plenty you can do, and then get involved with more extensive surveys, rather than just a casual walk. You can get involved with the Winter Wetland Bird Survey, iWebs, going out once a month for 7 months from September through to March, counting birds on local wetlands. And it could be just a tiny little pond or a bit of river or a section of beach or estuary. That's a great way. We have another scheme called the Countryside Bird Survey, which is generally how we monitor our sort of common birds of the countryside, whether it's farmland or other habitats. So that requires a little more effort. You have to walk 2 1-kilometer transects in a 1 kilometer square, and you have to do that twice in spring and early summer. But again, it's just a way of making your relationship with nature more meaningful. Following things through.
Yes, very great. They're great suggestions. Thank you.
And I mean, the breeding wader scheme, we're very excited about that, but there's absolutely nothing on the table yet. We've been promised a lump of money, and there's lots of people want to sit around that table and discuss how we spend it and what we can do. But that's obviously for the likes of, the curlew, very rare nowadays, about 100 pairs, has its own special scheme, but really we're more concerned about snipe and lapwing, which used to be much more common farmland birds, and now again are limited to a handful of sites with declining populations. There's more breeding waders on the red list than anything else, sort of thing. So that's a very exciting project going forward, but I don't really have much information about it just yet.
And what else would you like to see the government doing to protect our birds?
I mean, we work very closely and very well with them, but I still think we in the volunteer sector are sort of second-class citizens, that the civil servants make their decisions, and I would like a more integrated working relationship with them. We do carry some of the most important. They usually provide most, if not all, the money, and a little bit of expertise and supervision and whatever. But we do the grunt work, sort of thing. And it would just be to treat us more as an equal rather than, as a grant beneficiary or something. And, there's some money, get on with it, but don't make too much noise, sort of thing. It would be nice. And for me, on the seabird side, we still really haven't got a good national monitoring scheme. Every 15 or so years, we do work closely together very hard, and we try and do a national census. That means we get to every island, every bit of cliff, every sandy beach, and we try and do it in a 3 or 4 year window, and then add it all up, and we get the Irish population of seabirds. And we've just finished one of those. It's dragged on a bit because of COVID, because we lost the last couple of years. So but it's gone on for 5 or 6 years this time, but we're going to produce a new baseline of where our seabirds are. There's definitely good news stories. Gannets continue to go up, guillemots going up and whatever, but some other things are declining. The kittiwakes are one of the things we're most concerned about, which used to be the most common seabird we had. And now we know we've lost about 30% of them, and it's probably still going down. So they are red listed, and not just in Ireland, it's across the world. They're a pretty pan-global species in Arctic and subarctic and boreal temperate waters. They're a very good indicator of the marine environment, and they're under pressure everywhere. And warming ocean, acidifying ocean, overfishing, you can throw everything in there, but we don't quite know. And then the worrying news this year is that the avian influenza, the highly pathogenic avian influenza, which did hit some of our goose populations in the winter, it's still around. And at the moment, it's gone mad in the North Sea and Scotland, where literally tens of thousands of seabirds are dying nearly every day in the North Sea. It is terrifying seeing some of the images. It probably hasn't really gotten to the news in Ireland much, but the seabirds just dying en masse in colonies, and with chicks and eggs and whatever. It's very distressing, and it's really impacted in Scotland in particular. Gannets and great skewers, which are the two biggest, chunkiest, most aggressive seabirds. They are the ones you think would survive anything, and they've been absolutely decimated by this. And now for me, the worry is it's in some of the tern colonies. I know over in the North Sea, and my colleagues working there, they're heartbroken, and they've been more or less told to dig a big hole and throw all these dead birds in it, and more or less shut up shop.
Absolutely terrible.
And pretty certain it's going to arrive in Ireland big time, in the next few weeks. So literally the minute I finish
Is there anything that can be done? Just before we move on, I want to say that I actually witnessed the disconnect between the NGOs and the government at the biodiversity conference. There were a few people there doing some little sections of it, but basically it was the government bodies talking down, and then the last little interview with the NGOs absolutely seemed to be second-class citizens and sort of crying for help. Help.
Yeah.
So that does need to be addressed. Is there anything we can do about the avian flu?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just going to run its course, but we've got to try and make sure we don't help it spread, So I say it looks at the moment we stand the best. We know it's all over the North Sea. It's around the north of Scotland. It's in St Kilda to the north of us. We think, I think a gannet has just been washed up dead with it in Northern Ireland. And we think some other birds have died after the goose mortality in the northwest, the barnacle geese that died in Sligo and Donegal. A lot of them are still lying in the fields, and we think have been infecting other birds and mammals and whatever that scavenge on them. So I think it could flare up in the northwest, and I've heard a report of some, I think it might be terns in Cumbria. I don't know. All I can say is that we have some managed sites, wardened sites, which have public access, and we will probably be saying, please stay away. That. I have various visitors signed up to go out to Rockabill, and I think today I'm probably going to be telling them, no, we should be cancelling these trips. We just shouldn't be encouraging people to move on and off seabird colonies unless it is absolutely necessary. So, you would have to go to the Department of Agriculture website and look at the guidance there, and it's don't touch them. Unless you really, really have to, but generally don't touch them, report them. But I think this is where we need a better relationship with the authorities. Now is what do we do? Do we just leave them there because they're just going to infect more birds? I know if they are collected, they would have to be incinerated probably.
Yeah, that's the least you can get the word out, that people don't touch them if they see them. And can they report them to Birdwatch Ireland?
They can report them to us, or that there is a sort of hotline in the Department of Agriculture, which you can find on their website.
Okay, I'll put the links in the show notes. So can we just finish up with have you a particular success story you can tell us about a species regeneration in Ireland?
It has to be the one closest to my heart. It's the one I started working on, which is the Roseate Tern project we have, which is mostly in Rockabill, and we have a second site in Ladies Island Lake in Wexford. But there, we support at least 80%, 90% of the European population of this species, and it's all on two sites. Rockabill with over 1,700 pairs. We started managing the site a few years before I started with Birdwatch, and we had about 150 pairs of Roseate Terns, and now we have 1,740 or something, or 750.
That's absolutely amazing. So well done, Stephen. We all appreciate that.
And I would love more people to be able to get out and see them. We are trying to get groups and people out there. We got Minister Malcolm Noonan out there very recently, so I was really pleased we could show him, and hopefully he'll now be aware to the Seabird Conservation Stories, and that was literally, I think, the day after he'd announced we've got 3 million to work on breeding waders and whatever. So
I think he is actually very keen to help. He's got a particular soft spot for birds. Have you any books you could recommend?
Well, you need a good ID book to start with. So, and there's a thing called the Collins Guide, and it's come out. It's been reprinted umpteen times. It's got a black and red cover. The Collins Guide, and the great thing about it is that one of Ireland's best bird artists, Killian Malani, painted half the paintings in it, and it's It stood the test of time. It's an incredible resource. So you need an ID book to help you.
We had that one in our shop, in the gift shop here, and in the online shop. So if anybody in Ireland would like to get that, they can go and look on the Burren Nature Sanctuary shop. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, it's very inspiring and also very educational. I wasn't aware of the impact of the avian flu. I have seen images, but I didn't realize the impact in the North Sea. And thank you so much for the work you've done. And we'll hopefully see you in Galway whenever you come and visit your sister.
That's it. Okay. No, well, it gives me something to do. Yes, rather than going to sit on the beach or go for a swim. No, and I love the Burren, but I very rarely get there when the flowers are at its best and whatever. So it just doesn't work with the life on Seabird Islands. You miss from April through to August, just every year. Yeah,
that's true. So we'll put all the links in the show notes. And if anybody would like to get in touch, can you recommend how they would get in touch with you or with Birdwatch Ireland?
Well, my email if they want, but there's an info@birdwatchireland.ie. All general queries go there. The admin staff here in the office then try and send those things to various people, so literally this week somebody sent me a picture of a strange bird that flew into his window, and sadly I think it demised. And it's the usual thing. Can you identify this? So you get these pictures of a bird, and this was a garden warbler, it's a very rare bird in Ireland, and this guy is somewhere in County Limerick.
Brilliant.
We know a few of them further north in Ireland, in sort of Cavan, that sort of area.
Oh, that's great.
But to find one in a garden in Limerick is pretty great. But just send them to info@Birdwatch Ireland. We do our best, to answer as many queries.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It was absolutely lovely speaking to you. And thank you for all the work and everybody in Birdwatch Ireland.
You're welcome.
News from Burren Nature Sanctuary is that we hosted the DigiLego team for 3 days of intense training last week. Scientists, including professors from Trier University in Germany, NUIG in Galway, and ecologists in many varying disciplines, came together to create lab and quantitative open educational resources for the geography and environmental science domains. The project at Burren Nature Sanctuary consisted of multimedia training for creating online field courses, such as the groundbreaking accessible botany field trip designed by Dr. Karen Bacon from the National University of Ireland Galway Plant Sciences Department over the COVID lockdown. It was wonderful to listen into the diverse training sessions and watch the group filming methods for sampling, surveying and data collection with video, drone, macro and 360 cameras. It was a lot of fun to meet everyone, and we were blessed with the meadow at its peak flowering with a sea of yellow rattle, oxeye daisies, orchids and 3 days of good weather. When all the content is collated, it will be available for everyone to access if they wish. Just to remind people, we are now open 7 days a week for July and August, so please call in to visit.